So the first thing, I gotta grab the changing bag, and it looks like this. I don't have a darkroom, so I just use a changing bag so that I can get the film out in complete darkness. So I'll lay that out on the workbench, and then I'm gonna get my roll of film. Here's my Super 8 film camera. So get your film, and you'll know it's exposed because it has this exposed text on the film, and this is the film I'm using, TriX reversal film, black and white, and it was $40, so expensive. Next, I'm going to get out my Patterson tank, and I'm going to open that up and pull out the reels, because when I develop Super 8 film, I don't use the reels, just so there's more space to stuff the film into this tank. So I'm going to pull off these two white reels and just set them aside. And it's empty in there, but I'm going to keep that column. So I'll put the column back in, and what I got to do is pull out this film and stuff it into that tank. So I'm going to put everything inside the dark bag, the Patterson tank, the lid, the film. I'm going to get scissors just in case when I'm in there I need scissors to cut the film. Also going to get a hammer just in case if I'm pulling the film and it like breaks, then I'm going to just use a hammer to smash the cartridge so that I can get it all out. So there's two zippers here. I'm just going to zip them both up, and now that's in complete darkness, so I can stick my hands in here and do the work of taking the film out and then stuffing it into the tank. So I'm going to do that here, but I'm just going to jump forward. So there we go, I just cut forward. I pulled all the film out of that cartridge, and I just stuffed it into the Patterson tank, and then I put on the light sealing lid to it. So it's all in there, all my film. And I can take everything else out. Here's the cartridge, and you can see where it had the film, now it has nothing there. That thing spins, we'll look at that later. So just looking at the tank, as long as you keep that thing in, it is light tight. But I actually noticed here that when I put that on, a little bit of film like wedged in to the side there. So some of that film is getting exposed a little bit. And I'll try to show the camera what that is. It's like right in there. I could see, you can hardly even not really see it on the camera, but I had a little film kind of get smushed between there. Basically, it wasn't all stuffed in. So rather than just keep going for this whole process, I'm going to put it back in the dark bag and take out the light tight bit and stuff it down again just to see if I can really get it in there and make sure that the thing has a solid fit. So now I did. If I look around the edges, you can't really see on the camera, but if I look around the edges, I don't see any film squished in between there, so that is all good. Next, I'm going to use my 2 rolls formula. So I need to fill this thing up with water. I have 3 Folgers cans used for different things. Using that ratio I showed earlier, I'm getting 620 milliliters of water, and then I'm mixing that with 20 milliliters of this developer formula. So I'll pour that in, and that's in my developer and discard Folgers can. Right now it's developer, so the first step is to pour the developer in. I've got my film in there, it's light tight. Get the lid ready, and I'll just pour my mixed developer into the tank. And then after that, I need to start a timer because it's 12 minutes, and the first 30 seconds I'm just going to agitate it, and then after that, every 30 seconds I'll agitate it gently for 5 seconds. So I'm just putting the lid on nice and tight, and then I'm just going to swish it around a little, flip it over, and I'll do that for 12 minutes, gently agitating every 30 seconds, 4 or 5 seconds. And this developing process is good for a certain temperature. If it's too cold or too hot, you want to read about that. So as you can see, the timer in the bottom, it's getting towards 12 minutes. Now I'm just going to grab my developer and discard, which is now the discard can. So once I'm done with this, I'm just going to pour out my developer. I use mine as a one-shot developer, basically meaning once I develop with this, I discard it, and then next time I'll mix new developer. That's called one-shot developing. So I'm taking off the lid, and I'll just pour the used developer into my discard bucket. There it is, discard. At the end of all this is just going to be poured down the sink. It is safe to do. We'll be reusing the fixer, but the developer, we're not going to reuse that. The next step is the stop bath, so we're just using water for this, and 1.5 solo cups is enough to fill up the tank, so I'm just going to fill up my solo cup 1.5 times, pour it into the tank, and then I just need to gently agitate for 30 seconds for that. And that's the stop bath. Stops the developer from acting. And there's me just starting the timer. So 30 seconds has gone by, so we are good. Now we're going to discard that water into our discard jug. And we're going to keep using this for while we want to discard stuff and just save a trip to the sink. So I'm just discarding the water from the stop bath, and the next step is the fixer. This fixer I've mixed earlier using 806 powder, and I actually discarded some on accident previously, but I have enough in here where I'll pour the whole thing in. I'm going to pour the fixer in, and it's going to fix for 6 minutes, agitating 5 seconds every 30 seconds. And then we're going to reuse the fixer. So I need to take care to not discard that when I'm done. So the fixer is going, just gently agitating, flipping it over, swirling it around gently. Now that it's been 6 minutes, we can pour out the fixer, but we're going to pour it back into the fixer container using a funnel. You can use fixer like 15 times, I think, so I have a tally on the bottle showing how many rolls I've done. Alright, so now our fixer is all done. So now we're going to wash the film using the Ilford rinse method, and that is fill it up with water, flip it over 5 times, and then pour it out. Fill it up with water again, flip it over 10 times, and then pour it out. And then fill it up with water a 3rd time, flip it over 20 times, and then pour it out. So I'm just doing that here using the hose to rinse all of the fixer off the film. It's just water, so I'm just pouring it right out onto the driveway. So now as the final rinse, I'm going to use water and photo flow, and I'm just going to fill 1.5 again. So the first cup is just going to be water, and then the second time I fill the solo cup, it's going to be half, and then I'm going to put 2 drops of photo flow in there, and that is just to help the water slide right off the film. So just 2 drops is all I'm doing here. There's one. There's the second one. So I'll pour that in, and now I don't even need to agitate that or anything. I'll just let it sit in there for about 30 seconds to a minute and then bring it over. And now the film is no longer light sensitive. So I'm just going to pull the film out and hang it up. So as you can see, when I pull it out, it's all clumped up in there. I really just jammed it in. So I'm going to pull it all out as much as I can. Once I find one end of it, I have this PVC bar hung up in my garage, and I've got some binder clips on either end of it. So I clip one side to the binder clips and then just try to wind it over enough times to where it's hanging there, and then clip the end just like that. So I'll let it sit there and dry for 2 hours, and now I can pour my photo flow and water into the discard bucket. And then since I'm all done here, I can just take the discard and dump it down the sink. The fixer, I have learned that you want to store your fixer in a light, tight area. So I keep it in this little Craftsman, and then I'm just gonna wash everything else with water using the hose. Just gonna rinse it down really thoroughly, the Patterson tank, the funnel, all my Folgers cans. Just water, not using any soap, just rinsing it and then let it dry out in the sun. Okay, so while the film dries, I'm gonna go over what I do to turn my Super 8 canister into like a film holder. So I'm putting the vise on it. I've got the chisel right here with the hammer, and I'm just hammering right there on the lip, and it's separating nicely to open up the Super 8 canister, because there's a little spool in there that we're going to use that I'll show you in a minute. But that's how I'm going to store this when I'm done. So we use the chisel. We got it open like that. It's open like a little door there. You can't really see it without a light, but here it is with my phone light. You see that little spool in there. That spins as well. So once we're done, we're going to store the film on that. So here's a little hack that I use. I take a drill, a little screw, and a tiny drill bit, the smallest one I have. First, I'm going to drill a little pilot hole right in the center of that spinny spool. So I'll drill a little pilot hole into that, and then there that is, really small hole so that we have something for the small screw. Now I'll use a Phillips head, and just holding on to the spool so it doesn't spin, I want to drill that screw into that little plastic piece. And as you can see now, when I put my drill in there and spin it, it just spins the spool. So we're going to use that to take up the film. So rip off a tiny piece of masking tape and put that on the end of the reel. And then I decided to just open up, just push really hard to really open this thing up so that I can see inside and work better in there. So I'm just going to pull that really hard. Now I've got it nice and open. I'll really just push it back with my thumbs. And now that spins. So I'm just going to grab the film and then tape the end of it onto that spool. And I want to tape it in a way that righty-tighty will take it up. So I'm going to tape it to the bottom here. And I want to do that because if the screw does end up spinning, I want it to drill into the spool and not just unscrew, if that makes any sense. So now I have it to where I use the drill righty. I'm just going slow to make sure it's all working okay. And I have to use my other hand to kind of guide it in. It's got to be supervised and just kind of monitor it. So I kind of messed up here, so I'm starting over, but this shows you can take that little spool out, no problem. But I'm just putting that back in. I've still got it taped up. Now I've got my film glove on, and I've got a good little system, so I'm just gonna run the drill and start to pull up a bunch of film onto the reel. So I'm using two hands. I gotta use one hand to kind of guide it on so that it goes on properly. It's sort of a lot of finagling here with the film just to make sure it goes on. You could probably have a better setup than this, but this works. So just drilling again, there it goes. And then the way I had it hanging, it sort of gets caught up right here. So it all got like sort of tight around that there. So I'm just gonna unclip the end of it and So just unclip the binder clip there, and then now I can pull it freely so it'll all just come off and feed right onto the spool. So I'm kind of pinching the film too as it goes on with my film glove so that it kind of cleans off any dirt or hair or anything or whatever. But there we go. I've got the full reel back onto the spool. And that wasn't completely necessary before digitizing, but I did that just so I would have like everything in one collected place to feed into my Kodak Reels digitizer. So here it is. There's the reel of film, 3 minutes. It's all back on there. So now I'll just prepare the digitizer. Clean off the little window there. That piece of taped film shows the direction. So I'm just going to guide that in. Make sure it fits inside the grooves there. And then once that is seated in there nicely, I can just get the film reel ready and shut the little window and start recording. So the take-up reel starts to go, and the film is going frame by frame, capturing. Once enough film gets out on the right side, I'm going to weave it around and put it onto the take-up reel. So I'll just let that go. Now almost enough of it is out. So I'll make a little bend in the end of it. And then you can just stop that take-up reel with your hand, so I can just stop that. And put the film into the little tooth grabber, and then it'll pull it. And now it is in the take-up reel, and here we go. I just need to sit here and monitor this film as it unspools from the Super 8 canister and feeds into the take-up reel there. So right here, I probably should have just sat there the whole time. This I believe it's 50 feet, takes about 30 minutes to complete, and it's about 4 minutes of footage. But as you'll see, I got a little impatient, so I was trying to figure out, is there any way that I can just leave it to capture on its own? So I tried that, but then stuff happens like this. Like I took the film out and then it gets all backwards. And I thought maybe once it's out enough, can I just hang the film, the loosely spooled film, off that? That didn't work. So then I got this new kind of hairball that's all out of order. And now just trying to make that work. Try to hang that on there. Is that gonna do anything? Not really. And then eventually it just gets all tangled up, and so I just kind of have to sit there and wait for it. Probably would have been best to just sit there with my gloved hand on the reel, but eventually I settled on this, got the big hairball of film back there, and then I wound it up around the red thing and then down into the film gate. So here goes the end of it. It's chugging through the very last of the film. And it's done with the film, so I can stop it. We are all digitized. So now I'm just gonna take it all up. I want it to go clockwise again, righty-tighty. So I'm gonna use a new piece of tape. Tape the film. Tape the film to the spool. I'll put on my film glove so that I can just handle it and not worry too much about it. And here I got it going really fast. So I got it really really worked well. So now I've digitized my film and I put it in there and it's fully just ready for storage. Actually, I just got to take out that screw, but I can close it up, tape it up. Just hold on to the spinny part to make sure it doesn't spin while I take the screw out. Got that out. And then I'm just going to write a note on the film and the fixer. I forgot to do this earlier, so I'll just tally, and that's 4 rolls on the fixer. Alright, so I digitized the file. The first one I did was this file, movie 003, so I'm just going to watch it and show you how it came out on the computer. You can see it's 20 frames per second. The resolution is 1728 by 1296, and the format is H.264. This camera records at 18 frames per second, so the motion's going to be a little bit off. So you can immediately tell that the footage is inverted, and we're going to need to invert it using an editing program. I'm going to use FFmpeg, but you could do this in Premiere, Final Cut, anything else like that. Also, my camera, I'm having some issues with the exposure, where the exposure meter and therefore the exposure control, aperture control doesn't work. So the contrast isn't that good in a lot of this, and I'm going to look into a way to fix that. So let's go ahead and invert the footage. I'm going to use FFmpeg, and I went ahead and wrote down the command right here, and I'll walk through what this is, but you'll need FFmpeg installed. I have another video on how to get that installed. I'll just go through every part of the command here. First you say FFmpeg to call the program, and then before the input putting -R18. This will set the input frame rate, so we're changing it from 20 frames per second to 18 frames per second because that's what the camera records at. And then we'll do -I, and then I'll point to this file. So I would actually look like that. And then VF for video filter, and then we'll use negate. That will convert the negative so that the footage will look right. And then we specify R18 again to set the output frame rate to 18. And then here we're naming a codec, H.264, so libx264. And then CRF is constant rate factor, and it's controlling the quality. 18 is a good setting there. And then preset slow controls encoding speed versus compression, so that's going to give us high quality too, and then we just name the output file. So I've already done this, but this command would look like this, just like that. So I've already run that command, so I'm just going to show you what it came out looking like. If I double click and then open the inspector with Command I, you'll see that now we have encoded FPS is 18, so that's what we want. And then if I hit play, you see the colors look right now. This first shot looked great because I filmed it inside, but the rest of the footage I filmed outside in the pure sunlight, and I have a variable ND filter on the camera, but I haven't quite dialed it in, so as you can see this is very overexposed, but it still looks awesome, I think. So as you can see, most of the footage is overexposed, and I went back outside to try to recapture the footage with different settings while digitizing it in the Kodak Reels Digitizer to see if that would bring back some of this detail. So I'll show you that. I want to see if I can make this into a little cartridge that just feed out film. So I'm going to try to punch that out and punch a little hole in the wall there. Alright, since that's the only place where it's just one layer, I'm going to try to just cut a little thin slit in that. Using a chisel and the hammer, I'm able to do that. So now I'm just going to keep hacking away until I have like a full, kind of a full hole for the film to come through. Alright, so I just came at it this way with the chisel. And after doing that way with the chisel, I think that is kind of enough. I'm just going to get some pliers and pull it out. Got some pliers and it pulled right out, so let's see how this works. Not bad at all, just taped it up. It's coming right out there. So I'm going to try to just feed the whole thing out here, and hopefully this, if that stays shut, I think that should be a pretty good solution here. The test I'm doing here is The whole roll is pretty much overexposed, except for the first shot. So I'm going to turn the exposure down all the way and just see what we get with everything. All right, so now we're rolling. I already said the first shot is fine, so I don't really care about that. But the point is, check this out. You've got the film coming out of that now through this little hole that we just made. And I think it's just rolling along. All right, here we go. So now the film's coming out of that. It's got a little tension right there where it pulls, and that spool is just unwinding. I mean, it goes up there, through there, and then filming. So I'm gonna just see how long this goes, if it's good. All right, so maybe I was wrong here. So let's see. Let's do something else. We'll stop that. I think it was dark when it was too bright when I inverted it. So I actually need to turn the exposure all the way up. Right? Maybe just one stop up. So this is exposure +1. Okay, let's try something else here. Exposure. So really, even if I turn the exposure up, it looks like the contrast just isn't there. So that's just too white. I'm gonna go down back to 1. There's no contrast. So I'll just leave exposure 1 and let the whole thing finish. But now I've got this coming out of this sun. So we're doing good. So after digitizing that, I have these new files. So the original, this is before I inverted it. And this is when I turned it darker, which actually was the wrong move. As you can see, it just pushed everything darker. And when I pushed it darker in the inverted version, it just came out even lighter. So absolutely not, that was not the way to do it. But this one was where I set the exposure higher to 1. So I turned the exposure up on the negative, and that's going to result in turning the exposure down when I invert it. So here's what that looked like with exposure set to 1. So as you can see, it made everything a little bit darker, and while it didn't really fix the contrast issues, for example, this is still, you don't have much contrast there, so it's hard to see. It might have helped a little bit, but overall, I really need to get the exposure right in the camera to make this look good. So I'm going to be experimenting more with that. Now that I have this workflow down front to back, I know that I can keep trying, get used to my camera, get used to the settings. So that's all for this video. Leave a comment if you have any questions or comments, and I'll be sure to respond. And see you in the next video.